Come on down to the Law Student Lounge with your host, attorney Ryan McKeen, where law students like you tell their stories. So pull up a chair and join us in the lounge.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Law Student Lounge. I am here with Max Sterling. Good morning, Max.
Good morning, Attorney McKeen. Nice to meet you.
How are you doing this morning, Max?
I'm doing great. I feel coming off of a cold, but I feel fantastic. Studying for finals now. The final season is coming, and it's an interesting time.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Born in New York, raised in the Dominican Republic to two wonderful parents. We then moved to Florida in the late 90s, where I've been. I was raised in my formative years. Attended the University of Central Florida for undergrad, where I graduated with 2 bachelor's degrees in molecular biology, microbiology, and health sciences. You know, one of the things that I wanted to do when I was a little kid was not to be a lawyer to begin with. It was more to be a doctor. So I was in the pre-med track, and I was involved in a lot of things in pre-med, and not even had a mind towards the law or towards law school, which was where I was steeped in. And I actually did go to medical school for about a year and a half, but then I got very homesick and came back to Florida, where I then reassessed what I wanted to do. Then I got interested in the law and in pursuing that. Then eventually we moved over to Boston, for that fact, because Boston was just so attractive as a place with lots of legal education available to us. And here we are. Now I'm 1L at New England Law in Boston.
Awesome. Well, that's quite the story, Max. So let's unpack it. So how long do you spend in the Dominican?
So I was about 1.5, 2 years old when I went to the Dominican Republic, and I was about 8, 9 when I moved to Florida.
And so what was your experience like in the Dominican, and how has that impacted you as a law student?
Yes, definitely. You know, in the Dominican Republic, I think you could see how much a disparity between the haves and have-nots there are. Fortunately, my family was in a position to be kind of in the middle class of what you consider the Dominican Republic. My father was a politician, and my mother, while a homemaker, she was also a business owner. My parents are business owners there now. You know, coming here to the United States with kind of that mindset of how it can be in terms of that disparity. And once I did become interested in the law and coming up here to the Northeast, I noticed that in at least Massachusetts, in terms of availability of legal services to people of my descent, you know, Hispanics and Latin Americans, there aren't that many Latin American attorneys. I did some research, and I believe that the state of Massachusetts has the percentage of population is about 12% Hispanic, and the percentage of attorneys is less than 3% Hispanic. So I found that disparity to be pretty big, which is one of the reasons that I was inspired also to pursue the law and become an attorney. So that kind of being raised in the Dominican Republic, and seeing those disparities kind of informed me a lot as I grew up and as I became interested in the law.
So what is it that you want to do with your law degree when you get out?
So I want to put the skills and the time that I spent in, you know, in medicine and the health field, and assist those people that have been wronged by the medical system and by the healthcare system. I think my main goal would be to pursue some type of medical malpractice advocacy and personal injury advocacy, of which, you know, while in Florida, where I was originally, there's a lot of Hispanic attorneys that do service that community. There aren't a lot up here in the Northeast that service that community.
So how soon, when you graduate from University of Central Florida, you go straight to medical school?
Yeah, pretty much. So I graduated in 2013, and I went to medical school. I went to medical school in Grenada, in one of the Caribbean islands. I went there in 2015.
Okay. And, how hard was, I think it's an interesting thing. And was it a hard decision to leave medical school for you?
Extremely. I had just gotten married in December of 2015, after my first semester of medical school. And I was extremely, extremely homesick, and I was not focusing on my classes. So I took the difficult decision of kind of saying, what is it that I want to do with my life? What is it that I want to do with my career? And is staying in medical school worth the psychological impact that it was causing me? And I decided that it wasn't. I was going to go ahead and withdraw. But once I did that, I've been involved in a lot of things in the healthcare field. I've been involved in the pharmaceutical side. I've been involved in the clinical side. I've been involved in the laboratory side. I was even thinking about it. I'm used to dissecting bodies, but now I have to dissect my future, and I have to dissect my purpose. And in dissecting my purpose, I've always wanted to help people, and I wanted to see where I could fit into that. I thought that it was in medicine, but now, after years and years of being in the legal field, I know that this is where my actual calling is.
So you start law school in the fall of 2023,
Yep.
and you leave med school in about 2016. What do you do in the interim years?
So in the interim years, I did a little bit of this and a little bit of that, Ryan. I uh, I was a substitute teacher. I was a forensic technologist that did autopsies, for the Orange County Medical Examiner's Office. I was a I did lots of different things with hospitals, working in the emergency rooms by assisting physicians with record keeping. So I was in the front lines all the time with the physicians there. And ultimately, once I figured out that the legal field was what I wanted to do, I became a paralegal at a law firm there.
So when did you become a paralegal, and what was that like?
So sometime around 2017, I was offered a job as a part-time paralegal at a law firm there in Kissimmee, Florida, where I lived. And it was interesting. It's a Hispanic law firm, so it's a lot of mostly Hispanic clients. And being fully bilingual, being able to read, write, and understand Spanish and speak it, fluently, and being able to understand and explain, translate legal concepts and legal jargon into Spanish to somebody that could then understand it in their own language and in their own style, is very eye-opening when you see somebody understanding what a legal concept is. It's fantastic, and that's one of the greatest feelings to me, is that I can give that type of service to my community. So it was very interesting, and I was hooked on it almost immediately. So from being offered that position, then I immediately, applied and was granted a full-time position as a paralegal case manager, and that gave me even more responsibilities. Then I began drafting documents, drafting motions, drafting complaints, drafting demands, and even negotiating demands with adjusters and with attorneys on the other end. And that was very, very fulfilling as well, because I know that I was fighting for my clients, and being able to provide that service to them, and getting the best outcome for them was always great.
So a lot to unpack here. I went to law school with some paralegals. So let's sit with that for just a minute. And I'm going to ask you, as a paralegal, what were some of the things that the best attorneys that you worked for did?
Listen, one of the best things that they did would be to listen, and not just to interject their own ideas into things. They would listen to feedback, they would listen to suggestions. And the attorneys that I work with now, that's the best thing that they do, is listen. Sometimes, as attorneys, they have a lot of things going on in their heads, and they could have an idea that they just want to roll with. But I think slowing down, taking the time listen to either criticism or to suggestions, I think is very key as an attorney. And I think some of the best attorneys that I've worked with have done that. And, you know, you tend to, as somebody that's as highly educated as an attorney, sometimes when you go to somebody, as a paralegal, just like doctors sometimes do to nurses and say, well, I know better than you. I'm a professional. I've done this way longer than you have. I've gone to school longer than you have. Sometimes that's taken for granted, but as many doctors will tell you, and I'm sure many attorneys also, sometimes they know more than you just because they've been around. And so, like, I think that's the best thing that an attorney can do is to listen to and to try to apply suggestions and criticism.
You get nothing from this episode out, law students, other than what you just got from Max there. It's gold. Listening is a superpower. I agree 100% with everything he just said about listening and about lawyers being incredibly bad at listening. So if you're out there, listen to what the judge is saying. Listen to what your client is saying. If you're taking a deposition, listen to what the person being deposed is saying, because that'll allow you to ask better questions. Don't just stick to your script. I can't tell you how many examinations of witnesses that I've sat through where, had the lawyer listened, it would have changed the outcome of the case, instead of just marching through a checklist. Listening to your clients, understanding their story, not just taking what they say for granted, or on to the next thing, and listening to judges when they ask you questions, because every time you listen, you are creating opportunity. And if you're not listening, you're closed off to opportunity. So that is fantastic insight, Max. And if we do nothing else in the next 20 minutes or so, then we will have done something for someone out there. So Max is completely correct. Now, so you decide to go to law school, and how has being a paralegal sort of impacted your first semester as a lawyer, as a law student?
It hasn't impacted it as much as I thought it would, Ryan, to be honest. You know, I, in my job, we have a lot of mechanical things that we have to do. Review complaints, look at the demand, look at medical records, draft different types of motions, draft different types of legal documents. So in law school, a lot of people will tell you is that law school is more about learning how to think like a lawyer and how to get these things and figure and analyze and extrapolate meaning from cases and get concepts down. So at least in my first semester of my first year, it's been a lot of, whoa, I didn't know it was like that. Oh, that's interesting. That's pretty cool. Um, I think if anything, it's helped me help me understand the attorneys that I work with better, and kind of now I can see why they are filing a motion to dismiss here and filing a motion for summary judgment there, and what the legal arguments are for these things. So understanding those concepts now as a law student is very interesting, and makes my job even more fun and more enjoyable. But in terms of educating my actual studies, being a paralegal just helps me be more comfortable with the case that I read. I think that's probably the best advantage that I have as a paralegal going into law school. I'm definitely more comfortable than I think a lot of my other classmates that are not paralegals, in reading cases and understanding them. So I have that advantage that I'm able to read cases a little faster, I think, and get my briefs down a little faster. But other than that, I think it's just it's kind of working backwards. You would think that being a paralegal makes your job as a law student easier. I think it's being a law student is making my job as a paralegal easier, which is kind of interesting to me, at least.
You hit on something there, Max, which is that, to go to law school, you don't need any sort of background in the legal field at all. Like,
Right.
it's not like what you're doing in law school is so foreign. Even if you were working in a law firm, or working for a government agency, or whatever it is, working in a court even. What happens in law school is disconnected from the practice of law. And the flip of it is if you just go to law school and you're not out in the field, like what you learn in the classroom is disconnected from practice. So it's I think, unlike, look, if you go to school to be a doctor, yeah, you're, doing autopsies, and you're figuring out the body, and you're trying to do things that are actually practical. But in law school, like, one does not equal the other. Like, you don't. And the real trick for anyone out there is to combine those things. And how you do it matters. It's something that comes with time, inevitably. So you're not at a disadvantage, in my opinion, if you have no legal background, but you need to at some point gain the experience. And if you have no legal background, practical experience, you need to really get out there and learn the nuts and bolts, because they are very different things.
That's 100% right. And trust me, from somebody that did go to medical school and did study as a medical student, law school is a whole different monster in terms of the learning style and the way that you have to learn the information. Medical school, like a lot of other types of education that we are used to, is still a lot of memorization and then application in an exam, usually a multiple choice exam. And this is something that I've been, trying to psych myself up for now that we're going into the final season. Law school's examination is completely different from anything else that I've ever done, specifically the writing part. So that's something that I'm trepidated a little bit towards, but I'm looking forward towards the challenge.
So we're doing this interview right now. It's middle of November of your first semester of your first year. Can you talk about what the past 3 months, I guess, at this point, have been like for you, as you've adjusted to being a law student? What maybe was different? What were your expectations, and what was different than maybe you would have expected?
Sure. So it's my first semester of my law school career as a 1L. I go to the evening division program at New England Law. I work full time. So I also have a new baby that was a brand new baby when I started school. So she's 5 months old now. So I have to balance, and I have a 5-year-old as well, and a beautiful wife. So I have to balance being a father to two rambunctious children. I have to balance my job that is very understanding, but it's also very demanding. And I have to balance my law school, which is also very demanding and not very understanding. So the past 3 months have been a blur, to be honest. It's been a lot of activity. It's 20 plus hour days, sometimes sleeping for 4 hours, because I have to change a diaper in the middle of the night. I have to, tag out with my wife to make sure that she gets rest, even though I may be exhausted myself. Is spending time with my 5-year-old who demands time of me. And it's also, making sure that I participate in my school. I have to set some time aside to experience law school as well, which in it of itself is already difficult with the evening program, which doesn't have as many facilities to be able to participate as a student as the day program is. So putting all of that together, the past 3 months have been very, very full of hectic activity, but I think it's been three of the past most fulfilling months of my life, to be honest. I've been steeped in legal theory, reading different cases, both inside and outside of my class, and inside and outside of the scope of my classes, just because I've been so interested in particular subjects. Practicing questions, practicing tests, going to dance recitals with my daughter, um, doing different things. It's been awesome. And specifically for law students out there, I just want to make sure that they know, like, if I can do it, anybody can do it. I'm not different than any other person. I have a lot of different responsibilities, and I'm still able to manage law school. And I feel that I'm doing fairly well in law school, and I'm very confident that I'll be successful because I've set the time and I've made sure that everybody in my life understands just what, that entails, and everybody has been understanding and very helpful. So I just want anybody listening to know that if you're interested in going to law school, or you're in law school and you are interested in starting a family, as long as you have the right, support group, and you have the right mindset, I think that you're gonna succeed and make it.
Wow. First of all, congratulations
Thank you.
on having a family with old. And you also have an older daughter? Is that, did I
Yeah,
hear that in there?
she's 5 years old.
Okay. So I'm a dad, and yes, I have two children, and I have so much respect for you, Max. That is that is that is a lot. That is a lot, a lot, a lot. Some things I think to sort of sit with out there, like I think in my career, maybe it's not true for everybody, but for me, like my kids have been a great career blessing. And what I mean by that is one of the things that my favorite band, Pearl Jam, there's this article with Eddie Vedder, and he talks about being a dad. And he says, Pearl Jam before being a dad was, we go into the recording studio for 2 weeks, we get a keg of beer, we get cartons of cigarettes, and we'd jam, and we'd create an album. And after we all became dads and had kids, it's a six pack and a pack of smokes, and they get the record done in a few hours. And I think that work fills space, work fills time. And so when you're confronted with the extreme limitations of having a job, going to law school, having young children and newborns, if you're out there and you don't have children, the first few months of a child's life are very hard on parents. There is a lack of sleep. There's a disruption to schedule that is unbelievable. Except anybody out there who's experienced it will understand. Anybody out there who has not, it's impossible to understand at all. I think. I mean, you can understand on some level, but not the full experience. So, how have you gone about? Like, what are some? You're probably like the busiest person in law school in the whole country, or one of them. What are some tips that you have, or what are some things that you've done for time management that have helped you?
Okay, sure. I think one of the biggest things, at least for me, is communicating with my partner, making sure that my wife understands that when I need to study, I need to study. And of course, I can take breaks and help you with something, but it has to be structured. For the beginning part of the semester, at least, when I was kind of getting my feet wet and beginning to study and read cases and make outlines and briefs and writing all these things down, I wasn't used to that. So it was a tedious and long process that would take hours, hours and hours, almost all day. And I would separate my weekends to do that. So in my program, we have three days a week we have instruction. One of those days I would separate and say, that's a free day. We're going to do whatever we need to do as a family, and we're going to have fun or clean the house or whatever it is that we need to do. That day is sacred. The other day is a study day where I'm going to study, but I'm going to take it lightly so that I can still participate if need be. And then the other 2 days, Saturday and Sunday, I'm going to wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'm going to the office, and I'm going to study until noon. Gonna have lunch with you guys, 1:30 in the afternoon. Going to go back in until 8 o'clock bedtime, and then rinse and repeat for the next day. And I think that kind of structured understanding and structured communication, making sure that everybody is on the same page, has been the best thing for me time management wise, in law school.
Yeah, you are doing it right. I think time management comes strictly down to what you just said, which is blocking time for what's important, setting clear boundaries with yourself and with your family, your employer, your school, because otherwise, if you don't control your schedule, it really does control you. And so if you're out there and Max is doing this, like that's great advice for any law student. When I was in law school, I had it was me, my fiance, who's now my wife, and a parakeet, and it felt it felt overwhelming. But I definitely did not need to deploy those time management skills. And if you can learn that in law school and learn how to manage your time and your energy, like it's just going to serve you well as a lawyer. Because as hard as law school is, it doesn't get easier at all. Like none of this gets easier. You just get stronger at what it is that you're doing. So to me, like if you're out there and you're able to develop those time management skills, those prioritization, that communication skills with critical people in your life, that's going to be as valuable as anything you can possibly learn in the classroom. So and I'm also a believer too, if you're out there and you're listening, what Max did works for Max. And for some other people, it may not work for them. Experiment if you're out there, find what works for you, and start developing systems on actually how to manage your calendar.
And if I could share a book with some of the listeners that I used in conjunction with my family members. I listened to an audiobook. It was called Surviving Law School, A Practical Guide. I think the author's name is Donna Kay. And it was a very good because it kind of you could listen to it with your family, and it really harkens a lot. It said very, very, it would be on repeat essentially. The law student is going to spend a lot of time studying. The law student is going to be spending a lot of time studying. Law school is very time intensive. And so it kind of helped my family understand that um, that law school is time intensive, and I'm not, just playing around when I'm in the office by myself reading. It was some growing pains to do that, to get them to understand. But I think once they saw the actual amount of work that I was putting in, it was appreciated. And then it came to the point where my wife would ask me, "Hey, don't you need to go study right now? Don't you need to go read right now?" And it would keep me, she would keep me on my toes. And it's like, "Oh, you're right. It's about that time, isn't it?" So, it is difficult. It is hard, but it gets easier, it gets better. And if you have a support group that pushes you, then it's even more of a positive experience.
It is a support group is essential, and somebody once told me, or I read this somewhere and it makes sense, is the only ways you can measure what values to you are what you spend your money on and what is on your calendar, right? Where you're spending your time and money, those things critically matter, and it really does reflect your values. So yeah, having support system is important. I went to law school with she became my wife during law school. So it was easy in that respect of like, we both very much understood what it is that we were going through. It very much made sense, but that's awesome. So what is it that, you are most looking forward to as you go? I take it it's going to be a 4-year program for you if you're going nights.
That's right.
As you progress through your career, what is it that you're looking forward to doing? What classes are you looking forward to taking? What's that all look like for you, Max?
I don't know yet. I know that I have an end goal. Like I said earlier, I do want to. I am very interested. Most of my experience has been in the personal injury field, and I think that's where I'm needed. And both in personal injury, medical malpractice, that type of advocacy, I think, is what I really enjoy. Currently, for example, I work as a paralegal at a defense firm. So I worked first for a long time in a plaintiff side litigation for personal injury, and now I'm on the other end. And I think that I decided to pursue that to round me out. I wanted to be balanced in my experience, and I've learned a lot from that end as well. So in terms of my law school education, I want to be rounded out and balanced as well. So I don't just want to pursue things that may inform me on personal injury matters, but I want to try a little bit of immigration law, try a little bit of criminal law, and just round myself out as much as I can, as best as I can during the 4 years that I have in law school to get as best of a rounded out education, legal education as possible. So I'm interested in taking a little bit of everything and seeing what's out there. Will it change my mind into what I want to do in the future? Probably not. I think I'm fairly comfortable with the choice that I have for my ultimate goal. But I do want to be rounded out in my education because you never know. And I want to be able to even if, a client of mine is that doesn't know a certain part of the legal field of the law, asks me a question. If I may not have an answer, at least I may know a little bit of it, and I may know where to point them in terms of what to provide in terms of where they can go for to obtain the best service that they can, but at least I'll have an idea of what resources they need to access by being educated in it, rather than being, well, I don't know, you're out of luck. I'd rather say I'm not that sure, but I think it's this, and I think you should go and pursue this avenue. And I think that's a really big benefit to have as an attorney, is to know a little bit of everything so that you can at least provide be a resource for people that in your community that are looking for legal legal advice or legal help.
And look, if you're out there and you're doing the right thing, Max, because like, look, you're a law student, and it means you should be a student of law, and there should be a fluidity to your experience, because I had the good fortune of growing up as an associate and being in a general practice law firm. Like, I don't even think they have firms like this anymore, where it was like I do a divorce, a real estate closing, a will, a business transaction, a personal injury case, a whole bunch of different things, right? I didn't do any immigration, but it gave me experience, seeing the law in different ways, seeing how different areas of law proceeded differently. And look, law is increasingly specialized as a field, without question. Everything is much more complicated now than 18 years ago when I started practicing, and will only get more complicated in the future. Same thing with medicine. However, like, there's a value to understanding law holistically, and understanding, and also being open. Whether you're a law student and maybe you think, okay, I want to be a criminal defense lawyer, but somehow you get really inspired to be a tax lawyer. I don't know how this happens, but be open to that experience, and listen to yourself, like, where it is that you're drawn, what excites you, what doesn't excite you. If given the choice, like, what would you do? Because I think that matters. That matters a ton. And I also think it matters because really, law isn't, most people's legal careers are not linear. I would say that they're comprised of probably 4 or 5 different careers. It's almost useful to think of them as like 10-year blocks of a career. And so having the ability to have some basic levels of competence, or an openness, or just knowing how to learn different areas of law, I think keeps it exciting. I think it keeps it exciting. So as you're a law student, definitely sort of work that muscle, because it is a muscle, and it is important.
Yep.
So, all right, Max, I'm gonna end here. If you could go back to yourself 3 months ago, right before you started, and tell yourself one thing about law school, what would you tell yourself?
Um, what would I say? I would say don't. You're doing a good job by starting out and getting to know the details, but also get to know the overarching overhead view better. I think we want to get to the nitty-gritty of a case and try to get, word by word what the case means. But overall, you're trying to understand an overall concept, and you need to understand that overall concept in order to do well. So don't sweat the details, but at the same time, don't ignore the overarching concept. I think that's for three months ago max. That would be the best advice that I could give myself.
There you go. It's great. That's great advice, Max. Thank you so much for being on. I know your time is incredibly valuable. I'm sure you've got 10 things you got to get off this call and do. So I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much, Max. And I keep in touch, and really I look forward to following your success, and congratulations on the little one.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the time, and I appreciate being able to participate.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining Ryan McKeen in the Law Student Lounge, where real law students talk about their real lives. Are you a law student with a story to tell? Learn how you can share your story with us in the episode description. And join us next time in the Law Student Lounge.